Chapter 296. Seeing that Xianxia was completely unharmed and had passed through several dozen bolts without any change in expression, the faces of the 5 middle-aged men around the ballista all changed. Crap, he's an Earth Saint Master. Let's run. A middle-aged man with quick reactions immediately yelled out. Afterwards, he no longer cared about the 3 expensive ballistas and fled in all directions. They were smart and did not gather together. Instead, they each fled in a different direction. Only an Earth Saint Master could remain unscathed under the continuous barrage of the ballistas. Xianxia sneered. Suddenly, a 2-foot-long pure sword chi shot out from between his fingers. As the sword chi left his hand, it turned into a silver-white streak of light that shot toward a person with lightning speed. It directly pierced a 2-finger-wide hole in the person's throat. Xianxia shot out 5 more strands of sword chi from between his fingers, killing the 5 people who had fled. Afterwards, he leisurely arrived before their corpses and began to search their space belts. After a while, Xianxia smiled as he looked at the 30 or so pitch-black token bolts in his hand. He nodded in satisfaction. 5 great Saint Masters had over 30 token bolts. It was indeed very rare. It seemed that they had used the special terrain as cover to kill quite a few targets. This was because under the continuous barrage of the ballista bolts, the chances of a great Saint Master surviving was less than 1%. The next day, Xianxia passed through the plains. Suddenly, he caught sight of the footprints left behind by a large group of people. From the footprints, there were at least 100 people. It was quite a large group. Xianxia followed the footprints left behind by the group of people. In the end, he arrived at a steep mountain range. The mountain range was barren, without a single blade of grass. Sword-shaped peaks rose from the ground into the sky, making it difficult to climb. Xianxia observed the footprints on the ground as he randomly jumped around the mountain range. When he climbed up a huge boulder, the sound of battle faintly entered Xianxia's ears. Xianxia looked around, but the surrounding scenery was blocked by the huge mountain rocks, so he couldn't find anything. Moreover, the sound and shadow echoed in the mountain range, making it difficult to pinpoint the exact location. Xianxia looked around, and his gaze finally landed on a sword-shaped mountain peak that was 50 meters tall. He then flew up, and with a few leaps, he was already standing on the peak of the mountain. Standing on the peak, sure enough, Xianxia discovered that there was a large group of people fighting 5 kilometers ahead. There were more than 100 people, and the most conspicuous one was a person wrapped in a layer of faint green light. He constantly flashed in the crowd, and his speed was very fast. No one could touch the corner of his clothes, and wherever he passed, the people around him would fall one after another. A gleam of light flashed through Xianxia's eyes. He could tell with a single glance that the person wrapped in azure light was actually a wind-attributed Earth Saint Master. He was currently slaughtering 100 great Saint Masters all by himself. The battle lasted for a very short period of time, and out of the 100 great Saint Masters, only 20 were left standing. These 20 people knew that they were no match for the Earth Saint Master, so they didn't continue to fight. They immediately threw down their spatial belts and scattered in all directions. The Earth Saint Master didn't chase after them, but instead began to collect the tokens from the spatial belts. Suddenly, Xianxia jumped down from the 50-meter-tall mountain peak and shot towards the middle-aged man. 5 kilometers away, the middle-aged man who was collecting tokens immediately discovered Xianxia. With his extraordinary eyesight, he could tell that the person who had just arrived was very strong. Immediately, he increased the speed at which he collected tokens. Xianxia continued to leap through the mountain range, quickly closing in on the middle-aged man. In less than 10 breaths of time, he had already crossed the 5-kilometer distance. The light wind sword carried a sharp sword chi as it pierced towards the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man didn't have time to collect the rest of his spatial belt. Instead, he took out a long sword that was as wide as a palm and sent it towards Xianxia's light wind sword. The 2 weapons collided in midair, and an intense energy fluctuation erupted, causing the hard ground under their feet to crack like a spider web. After the first strike, Xianxia's feet slid, and like a ghost, he appeared beside the middle-aged man. The light wind sword transformed into a hazy sword image as it pierced towards the middle-aged man. Although it seemed like only one strike, Xianxia had already stabbed out 3 times. The middle-aged man's eyes flashed as he thought to himself, "What an exquisite sword technique." Following which, the large sword in his hand transformed into a hazy sword image and blocked Xianxia's light wind sword. Because the middle-aged man's saint force was of the wind attribute, his speed was not much slower than Xianxia's. The two of them moved quickly in the field, and the strong wind they brought along caused a fierce gale to blow around them. The stones on the ground where Sword Shadow was standing were even more densely packed with cracks. Xianxia's sword became faster and faster, and the trajectory of his sword became more and more strange. The middle-aged man found it more and more difficult to block, and slowly he was forced into a disadvantageous position by Xianxia. The middle-aged man's expression became more and more serious. He never thought that he would meet such a strong opponent today. At such a young age, he was actually able to force a 5th cycle Earth Saint Master into such a state. Suddenly, the light wind sword in Xianxia's hand trembled and turned into a sky full of sword images that surrounded the middle-aged man. The sword images were so dense that they covered the sky and covered the sun, covering every inch of space in front of the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man's face became serious as he quickly retreated. At the same time, the large sword in his hand emitted a dazzling green light. Pointing it towards the sky, he shouted, "Wind gather!" The green light on the large sword dispersed into thousands of strands, as if it had merged with the surrounding space, creating a tight connection. Suddenly, the wind began to blow, and the sand and stones on the ground were sent flying. Dust filled the sky as a huge tornado quickly formed, trapping Xianxia within it. Xianxia's body was suddenly greatly restricted. The tornado's powerful pulling force continued to pull at Xianxia's body, trying to blow Xianxia into the sky. Xianxia's body seemed to be rooted to the ground, as if he was connected to the earth. His body stood there motionlessly. Although he was able to withstand the tornado's powerful pulling force, Xianxia was also greatly restricted. He was unable to move at all. If his feet moved even the slightest bit, it was likely that his entire body would be blown into the sky by the tornado. The middle-aged man's large sword emitted a dazzling green light as he pointed it towards the sky. Once again he shouted, "Wild wind dance." As soon as he finished speaking, the tornado spun faster and faster. It was like a sharp wind blade that constantly cut at Xianxia's body. The clothes on his body were immediately torn to shreds, and small wounds appeared on his body. As soon as the blood came out, it was immediately blown away. Xianxia's face immediately became serious. The middle-aged man's strength was beyond his expectations. It could be said that he was the strongest Earth Saint Master he had ever met. Suddenly, Xianxia let out a long roar towards the sky. His voice was so loud that it spread far and wide. Even people tens of kilometers away could hear it clearly. Immediately after, a surge of saint force surged out from his body as he stomped on the ground. The ground he was standing on immediately cracked open. Withstanding the strong wind, he forcefully charged out from the ground with his light wind sword, mercilessly thrusting towards the middle-aged man who was still in the heavenly sword pose. The middle-aged man was greatly shocked. Xianxia being able to break through the tornado was completely out of his expectations. At that moment, he no longer cared about maintaining the tornado and immediately swung his large sword towards Xianxia. Dang! A loud sound rang out as the two saint weapons collided. A powerful saint chi crazily spread out in all directions, causing Xianxia and the middle-aged man to be forced back a few steps. A layer of purple and green light emitted from the light wind sword. Xianxia brandished the light wind sword and a finger-sized purple and green sword chi escaped from the sword and shot towards the middle-aged man like lightning. The middle-aged man immediately used his large sword to block in front of him. When the purple and green sword chi hit his large sword, a finger-sized hole appeared on the surface of the large sword. The middle-aged man's entire body trembled as a muffled groan came from his throat. His face instantly became pale white. How is this possible? Looking at the finger-sized hole that appeared on the giant sword, The middle-aged man's eyes widened, and his face was filled with shock. Jianshan did not stop there. With another wave of his long sword, another finger-sized purple and green sword chi shot towards the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man's face greatly changed. He had already seen the power of the purple and green sword chi and did not dare to meet it head-on. He immediately dodged to the side. Jianshan slid forward and stabbed his light wind sword towards the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man's strength was just too strong. Moreover, he also had a battle skill. If he did not use the purple and green sword chi, Jianshan would not be able to kill him in a short amount of time. The middle-aged man's eyes were sharp. With a single glance, he saw the purple and green sword chi on Jianshan's saint weapon. In his mind, he immediately thought of the powerful sword chi that had pierced through his own saint weapon and was scared out of his wits. Without any hesitation, he immediately fled into the distance, disappearing without a trace in the blink of an eye. Jianshan gently sighed as he stared in the direction the middle-aged man had disappeared in. The middle-aged man was an Earth Saint Master with wind-attributed Saint Force. If he wanted to flee, Jianshan would not have been able to catch up to him. Jianshan couldn't help but feel a little regretful. He had originally thought that he would be able to gain quite a bit, but the middle-aged man was just too strong. Moreover, he was also very vigilant. When Jianshan used the purple and green sword chi, the middle-aged man ran away without a fight. This left Jianshan with no other choice but to watch him leave. Jianshan's gaze swept over the corpses lying not too far away. After a slight hesitation, he went forward and searched through their spatial belts. In total, he found over 30 tokens. If the middle-aged man had not taken some of them, Jianshan's gains would have been even more plentiful. After that, Jianshan continued to wander around the barren mountain range, looking for prey. Chapter 297. Looking at the fireball flying in the sky, Jianshan's expression suddenly froze, faintly revealing an expression of disbelief. Immediately after, when the fireball arrived, he immediately leaped to the side. Boom! Following a deafening sound, the fireball exploded where Jianshan had just been standing, exploding a 3-meter-wide crater in the ground. Gravel filled the sky, like sharp swords, flew in all directions from the explosion. Looking at that huge crater, Jianshan's eyes opened wide, his face full of astonishment. This seems to be an energy shell fired from a magic crystal cannon. After a few breaths of time, another muffled cannon sound was heard, and another fireball was shot from a sword-shaped mountain peak a few kilometers away. Jianshan's gaze locked on that mountain peak, and he quickly rushed over, quickly arriving at the foot of that sword-shaped mountain peak. After a few leaps, he easily climbed to the top of the mountain peak. The area of the mountain peak wasn't large, only 10 meters in circumference. But in the center, there was a 5-meter-wide hole dug by someone, and a pitch-black magic crystal cannon was quietly set up inside. A youth about 30 years of age was lying on the edge of the huge hole, looking outside, looking for the target. That sneaky appearance of his looked very comical. When Jianshan saw this magic crystal cannon, a black line appeared on his head. He didn't expect that he had guessed correctly. The thing that shot the fireball was really a magic crystal cannon. Someone actually brought in a magic crystal cannon during the mercenary tournament's knockout round. At this time, that youth seemed to have discovered something strange behind him and abruptly turned back to look. What he saw immediately made him turn pale with fright. Although Jianshan was very young, how could he be a mediocre person if he could silently sneak in here? The youth didn't hesitate for a moment and decisively jumped down from the 100-meter-tall sword-shaped mountain peak, preparing to escape. Jianshan's body swayed slightly, and he arrived in front of the youth in an instant. He reached out and grabbed the youth who was already in midair, then lifted him up with one hand and casually threw him into the huge crater. "Don't kill me, I'm willing to give you all of my token arrows." The youth knew that there was no hope of escape, so he immediately begged for mercy, his voice filled with panic. Jianshan stood at the edge of the crater and looked down at the youth condescendingly. He asked, "What's your name?" I'm called Jerica," the youth answered. Jianshan's gaze swept across the magic crystal cannons set up in the crater and then landed on Jerica. He asked, Do you know how to assemble a magic crystal cannon? Yes. I've been studying magic crystal cannons since I was a child. I'm very familiar with every part of a magic crystal cannon. Even with my eyes closed, I can assemble a magic crystal cannon in a very short time, Jessica hurriedly said. A happy smile appeared on Xianxia's face, and he said, "Do you want to live?" "Yes, great hero, please let me go. I'm willing to give you everything I have." Jerica's voice carried a hint of pleading. Xianxia jumped into the crater, and then took out several large metal boxes from his space ring, filling the peak of the sword-shaped mountain peak to the brim. Xianxia pointed at the large metal boxes and said, "If you teach me how to assemble these parts, I'll let you go, and I'll even give you a lot of rewards." Hearing that, the youth opened one of the large metal boxes with some surprise and doubt, revealing two strangely shaped pieces of steel. This is actually the base of a magic crystal cannon." Jerica recognized the part with a single glance, and he exclaimed in surprise. Xianxia also let out a sigh of relief when he saw Jerica recognize the parts so quickly. The large pile of parts had been with him for quite some time now, but unfortunately he did not know how to assemble them, so they had become a pile of trash. Now that he finally had the chance to assemble a magic crystal cannon, Xianxia felt a little excited. This was a powerful weapon that could kill Earth Saint Masters. Although he already possessed the strength of an Earth Saint Master, and regular Earth Saint Masters could not threaten him, this magic crystal cannon was still very useful. "Open them all and see if you have the ability to assemble them. I hope you don't disappoint me," Xianxia indifferently said from the side. "As long as it's a magic crystal cannon, there's no problem that can stop me. I have the ability to fix anything that goes wrong." Jerica's voice was filled with great confidence. It seemed that he had been researching magic crystal cannons for quite some time already. Afterward, Jerica opened the metal boxes one by one and gradually discovered that the materials of the magic crystal cannon were different. A sliver of surprise appeared in his eyes as he said in shock, "This is actually a high-level magic crystal cannon. Heavens, this is actually a magic crystal cannon with a range of 20 kilometers. It's enough to kill Earth's Saint Masters. Am I seeing things? There's only one magic crystal cannon like this in our Lado Kingdom, and we spent a lot of money to buy it. Hurry up and assemble it for me. The sooner you finish, the sooner you can leave safely," Xianxia impatiently urged from the side. Yes, I'll assemble it immediately." Only then did Jerica realize that his life was still in danger. He could lose his life at any time. Afterward, Jerica began to work with both hands, quickly assembling the various components of the magic crystal cannon. In just an hour, Jerica had assembled the magic crystal cannon 3 times, allowing Xianxia to watch carefully. Although there were over 1,000 components of the magic crystal cannon, Xianxia was extremely smart and had a great memory. He learned how to assemble the magic crystal cannon very quickly. After the high-level magic crystal cannon was assembled, it was extremely large. When the base of the cannon opened up, it took up an area of 10 square meters. Afterward, Xianxia immediately took out a Class 5 monster core from his spatial pouch to recharge the cannon. He excitedly muttered to himself, "Let me test the might of this high-level magic crystal cannon." Jerica's face was filled with pain as he stood to one side. He said, "There's no need to doubt the might of a high-level magic crystal cannon. Using a Class 5 monster core to test it is far too much of a waste." As the energy from the monster core poured into the magic crystal cannon, the space around the magic crystal cannon began to distort slightly. A violent and surging energy fluctuation was emitted from the magic crystal cannon, giving off a dangerous feeling that it could explode at any time. Jessica couldn't help but take a few steps back. Even he couldn't withstand the surging energy waves from the high-grade magic crystal cannons. Bang! The charging was completed quickly, and with a loud sound, the advanced magic crystal cannon began to fire. A dazzling fireball shot out from the barrel of the magic crystal cannon, and with surging and violent energy fluctuations, it streaked across the sky and finally bombarded a mountain several kilometers away. Boom! A loud sound rang out in the distance. Dust and smoke filled the sky, enveloping the entire mountain. Countless boulders fell from the mountain, producing loud sounds as they collided with the mountain. A huge mushroom cloud with a diameter of 1 kilometer had already formed in the sky above the mountain, and it was still rapidly expanding. It was extremely terrifying. A while later, when the dust and smoke slowly dispersed, the sword-shaped mountain had already disappeared. It had been destroyed by the magic crystal cannon. Is this the might of a high-level magic crystal cannon? It really is shocking. No wonder it's a super weapon that can kill Earth's Saint Masters. Jessica exclaimed as she stared at the sword-shaped mountain peak that had already disappeared in the distance with her mouth agape. Xianxia was also shocked by the might of the magic crystal cannon. It really was worthy of being a super weapon that could kill Earth Saint Masters and blast Class 5 magical beasts to death. It really was extremely powerful. Just the might of this attack was definitely not something an Earth Saint Master could achieve. Xianxia took out 10 Class 4 monster cores and gave them to Jerica. He said, "You can go. This is your reward." Jerica thanked him gratefully and immediately left after taking the monster cores. He seemed to be in a hurry as he fled, as if he was afraid that Xianxia would go back on his word. Xianxia let out a long sigh. These 2 high-level magic crystal cannons in his hands were finally no longer a pile of useless parts. Afterwards, Xianxia once again dismantled the magic crystal cannons into larger parts and stored them in his spatial ring. Just as he finished this action, an ear-piercing sound rang out from behind him. The light wind sword appeared in his hand as he stabbed behind him like a bolt of lightning. Boom! A violent explosion rang out as a surging wave of energy engulfed Xianxia. Following that, Xianxia's body was sent flying as he spat out a mouthful of blood. His face instantly became pale and his clothes became tattered. The mountain peak he had been standing on had completely disappeared. Xianxia's body was like a kite with its string cut as he landed on a nearby mountain peak. He spat out another mouthful of blood as he stared into the distance in shock. 3 kilometers away on a sword-shaped mountain peak stood a person wearing yellow robes. Because the distance was too far, Xianxia was unable to clearly see the person's appearance. Xianxia's heart was filled with shock. The opponent's strength was just too strong. Just a single attack was enough to injure him quite heavily. Moreover, the attack had been launched from 3 kilometers away. Xianxia immediately jumped down from the mountain peak and quickly landed on the ground, using the large rocks as cover. The sound of something breaking through the air could be heard from afar as it approached Xianxia's location. Xianxia used the large rocks as cover and used his hearing to pinpoint the opponent's location. He then jumped out from behind the mountain peak and attacked his target. Towards Xianxia's sudden attack, the yellow-robed man was clearly prepared. A 3-finger-wide, 4-foot-long sword appeared in his hand. The sword was light blue in color and had a faint ripple of water on its surface as it emitted a layer of Saint Qi. The yellow-robed man blocked Xianxia's attack with his sword and clashed with Xianxia over a dozen times with lightning-like speed. In the end, the two of them separated. Even though Xianxia's face was pale, he still stood there proudly, unyielding. He held the sword in his right hand and pointed it straight at the yellow-robed man. However, when Xianxia saw the yellow-robed man's appearance, a sliver of surprise immediately appeared in his eyes. The yellow-robed man was actually a girl around 20 years of age. She was extremely beautiful and possessed a heavenly beauty. Her long black hair danced in the wind behind her, and although her eyes were sharp, they were also filled with intelligence. An extraordinary heroic spirit radiated from between her brows. On the woman's back was a 2-meter-long longbow. It was completely golden in color and emitted a faint golden light. It was clearly not an ordinary bow. Looking at the girl, Xianxia frowned slightly as a sliver of thought appeared in his eyes. For some reason, he felt that the girl was somewhat familiar, as if he had seen her somewhere before, but he could not recall where. Chapter 298. Hearing the girl's strange words, Xianxia was stunned. He did not understand what was going on, but then a thought flashed through his mind. A scene suddenly appeared in his mind. Xianxia was shocked. He looked at the girl in yellow in surprise and said in surprise, "It's actually you." This yellow-clothed girl was none other than the girl he had accidentally bumped into when he was bathing in a river near Wake City. She was also bathing in the river, completely naked. Seeing that Jianchen actually recognized her, the girl in yellow recalled the scene from back then. She could not help but feel even more ashamed and angry. Jianchen's image in her heart became abominable and unforgivable. With a shout, she raised her sword and charged at Xianxia. All these years, the yellow-clothed woman had never forgotten the man who had peeked at her body for the first time. She had always hated him to the core and thought of how to punish the person who had peeked at her body. However, ever since they had parted ways at Wake City, she hadn't been able to find any trace of Jianchen. This had caused her heart to be filled with an indescribable anger that she had nowhere to vent. Now that she had seen the person who had peeked at her body, the anger that had been pent up in her heart for a long time was completely unleashed. She couldn't control the anger that had been building up in her heart. Jianchen's face was solemn. The powerful attack from the girl in yellow had already made him extremely fearful. Even so, he did not feel the slightest bit of fear. His fighting spirit was high as he fought with the girl in yellow. After the two of them had exchanged a few blows, the girl in yellow suddenly realized that Jianchen's current strength was worlds apart from back then. Earth Saint Master, you've actually broken through to Earth Saint Master. How is this possible? Back then, you were far weaker than me and could not fight back at all. In just a few short years, how has your strength changed so much? You're actually on par with me now. The yellow-clothed woman's face was full of shock. She stared at Jianchen's handsome face in disbelief, clearly unable to accept this reality. Even so, his hands did not stop moving. The sky-blue longsword was filled with powerful water-attributed saint force as it stabbed towards Jianchen. Miss, what happened back then was a complete misunderstanding. Even if we continue to fight, we won't be able to determine the victor. Why don't we stop? Even though it had been so long, Jianchen still felt that he was in the wrong. After all, she was a girl. Not only had he seen her body, but he had also seen the part that he shouldn't have seen. This made him feel somewhat apologetic. Hooligan, don't even think about it. I will definitely teach you a good lesson. As soon as she heard Jianchen mention the past, the yellow-clothed girl's face was filled with shame and anger. Her anger became even more intense. Then, she quickly retreated a distance and picked up the golden bow on her back. She aimed at Jianchen and pulled the bowstring. As the bowstring was slowly pulled back, an arrow completely formed from pure energy gradually took shape. The entire bow gave off a powerful pulse of energy. Jianchen's expression immediately changed. He had already guessed that the powerful attack from before was probably shot by the yellow-clothed girl with the help of the bow. Without any hesitation, he immediately dodged and hid behind a mountain. At this moment, the yellow-clothed girl released the bowstring. The arrow completely formed from pure energy tore through the air and directly struck the mountain that Jianchen was hiding behind. Boom! With a deafening sound, the 300-meter-tall mountain that Jianchen was hiding behind collapsed. Countless broken rocks rolled down, creating a spectacular sight. Jianchen ran out as if he was running for his life. His body was covered in dust, but his heart was filled with shock. The bow in the girl's hand was just too powerful. He had no idea what kind of weapon it was, but it could actually threaten Earth Saint Masters. Moreover, it was much more powerful than a high-level magic crystal cannon. Just as Jianchen steadied himself, another sword shot out from the girl's hand, flying toward Jianchen with lightning speed. Jianchen's expression drastically changed. He immediately dodged to the side as fast as he could. In the end, the shining golden arrow had basically pierced through Jianchen's body. He had barely dodged it. Boom! With another boom, another sword-shaped mountain collapsed. The power of the arrows from the golden bow was unbelievable. Every single strike was enough to topple a mountain. Even Earth Saint Masters would not be able to do such a thing. They were basically on par with peak Heaven Saint Masters. Jianchen's body constantly flickered as he dodged the girl's arrows. Although the golden arrows were extremely fast, Jianchen was not slow either. He would always be able to narrowly dodge them at the most crucial moment. There were many times when the golden arrows brushed past his body. It seemed extremely dangerous. After suffering once, Jianshan no longer dared to receive the golden arrows so easily. The golden arrows were just too powerful. Just a single arrow was enough to heavily injure him. Damn pervert, if you're a man, don't jump around there. After shooting over 20 arrows, the yellow-clothed girl finally lost her patience and angrily shouted, "If I don't dodge, am I supposed to stand here and be a live target for you to shoot at? I'm not that stupid." Jianshan gloomily replied. The yellow-clothed girl immediately became speechless. Her cheeks puffed up as she felt extremely annoyed. She hated Jianshan to the core. In the past, she had been thinking about how to cut the person who had peeped at her body into 1,000 pieces. But now that they had met, she suddenly realized that this bastard that she could bully as she pleased had already grown to the same level as her at an unbelievable speed. Even if he was jumping around in front of her, she could not do anything to him. Haha, Luan, it's all thanks to you making such a big commotion here that I was able to find you. You really made me suffer looking for you. Suddenly, a loud laugh rang out from the distance. On a nearby mountain peak, 5 people had appeared at an unknown time. Hearing this, the yellow-clothed girl's expression suddenly changed. She immediately stopped attacking Jianshan and adjusted her direction. She directly pulled the bowstring and shot at the 5 people on the mountain peak without any hesitation. Whoosh! The golden arrow pierced through the sky, bringing along a burst of ear-piercing sound as it moved forward at lightning speed. The 5 people on the mountain peak immediately jumped down. They actually borrowed the force of the dive to fly towards the yellow-clothed girl. Just as the golden arrow was about to hit them, a layer of transparent barrier suddenly appeared and wrapped around them. When the powerful golden arrow hit the barrier suddenly trembled violently. However, it did not break and successfully blocked the golden arrow. The 5 people inside the barrier were also safe and sound. Don't waste your energy. Your ruler weapon can't hurt me. The youth in the middle of the 5 laughed. He was not very old and looked about the same age as Ming Dong, about 27 or 28 years old. Ruler weapon? Could it be that the powerful longbow is a king weapon? Jianshan's face was full of doubts. A ruler weapon was very unfamiliar to him. Today was the first time he had heard of it. Miss Luan, you should obediently hand over the ruler weapon. Now that there is no one to protect you, let's see how you can escape from our hands. A middle-aged man standing beside the youth laughed and said with a relaxed expression. The yellow-clothed girl's face was as cold as ice. Her eyes were filled with hatred and anger as she stared at the 5 people. She angrily said, "You want my ruler weapon? Don't even think about it. After we get out, my Uncle Feng and Uncle Yun will definitely not let you off. They will avenge my Huang family's disciples." Miss Luan, don't expect elders Feng and Yun. Those 2 old fellows will naturally be dealt with. The 5 people quickly rushed over. The youth in the middle laughed without any fear. Hearing this, the yellow-clothed girl's face darkened. She drew her bow and shot out 3 swords to slow down the speed of the 5 people. She said in a deep voice, "So your Shi family has been scheming for our Huang family's ruler weapon for a long time. Our Shi family is determined to obtain the ruler weapon. Miss Luan, you should obediently hand it over. Don't waste your energy." As they spoke, the distance between the 5 people and the yellow-clothed girl was only 1 kilometer. At this time, the yellow-clothed woman continuously drew her bow. Golden arrows shot out one after another, causing the barrier around the 5 people to constantly tremble. The violent energy fluctuations had already destroyed the nearby mountain rocks into a mess. The deafening sounds of explosions were incessant. Jianshan was dumbfounded as he watched from the side. The power of the bow was really too great. The arrows shot by the yellow-clothed girl were actually several times stronger than the ones that killed him before. Unfortunately, they were unable to break through the seemingly weak barrier. Although the 5 people did not suffer any injuries, they were still unable to move forward due to the powerful impact. They were forcibly stopped in their tracks. Don't waste your energy. Using the ruler weapon consumes a lot of your saint force. You won't be able to last long. Once your saint force is exhausted, your fate will be completely in our hands. The young man hiding in the barrier had an evil smile on his face. His eyes were filled with obscenity as they constantly swept over the yellow-clothed girl's body. The yellow-clothed girl was unmoved. She continued to shoot arrow after arrow at them. The sound of explosions in the distance was unceasing. The rumbling sound reverberated throughout the entire mountain range and spread far and wide. The commotion was extremely loud and it immediately attracted a lot of people. However, everyone carefully hid in the distance and watched. No one dared to stick their heads out. In the barrier, the 4 middle-aged men standing beside the young man took advantage of the gap between the yellow-clothed girl's arrows and immediately rushed out from the barrier. They quickly rushed towards the yellow-clothed girl from 4 different directions. The yellow-clothed girl immediately changed her target. She directly shot out her sword. A golden energy arrow shot towards one of the men with lightning speed. With a rumbling sound, the man was directly sent flying while vomiting blood. Following the violent vibration of the bowstring, another golden arrow shot out. It pierced through the chest of one of the middle-aged men, creating a fist-sized hole in his chest. As the arrow passed through his body, the energy that leaked out shattered his heart and internal organs. In the short time that the yellow-clothed girl had shot 2 men, the other 2 men had already crossed the distance between them and arrived in front of the yellow-clothed girl. The saint weapons in their hands were filled with surging saint force. They mercilessly slashed towards the yellow-clothed girl. At such a close distance, the longbow had already lost its effect. The yellow-clothed girl once again carried the longbow on her back. She took out a 3-finger-wide sky-blue longsword and began to fight with the 2 middle-aged men. Let's see who can save you now. At this moment, the young man covered in a barrier also rushed over. He held a fiery red spear in his hand and joined the battle against the yellow-clothed girl. Chapter 299. If this continues, you won't be able to hold on for long. Just obediently hand over the king weapon, don't waste your energy. That young man laughed loudly, his expression was indescribably happy, as if the king weapon was already in his bag. Sure, Xiangran, you want my king weapon? Dream on. The young girl's face was gloomy as she angrily shouted. Then she turned her head to look at Jianchen and loudly said, "Stinking rogue, help me deal with them and I'll write off the grudge between us." Hearing that the young girl was actually asking for help, the young man's face immediately sank. His sharp gaze looked at Jianchen and he shouted, "This is a personal grudge between our Shi clan and the Huang clan. Friend, it's best if you don't interfere, or else you'll have to bear the consequences. This is a personal grudge between our 2 clans. If an outsider dares to interfere, he definitely won't live for more than 3 days." The middle-aged man who was fighting with the young girl in yellow also angrily shouted. This man was wearing a black robe and had a tall and sturdy build. "Unrelated people, back off immediately, or else it will be considered as a provocation to our Shi clan. You will forever be our Shi clan's enemy and be hunted down by our Shi clan." The last middle-aged man with a scar on his face also angrily shouted, threatening Jianchen. Although they had an absolute advantage in terms of numbers, the king weapon was about to be obtained. At this crucial moment, no one wanted any accidents to happen. Once they obtained the king weapon in the young girl's hands, they would no longer have the slightest fear. In the mercenary tournament, no one would be able to threaten them. Obtaining first place would be a sure thing. Standing on the side, Jianchen directly ignored the threats of these people. Seeing that the young girl was being beaten back by the 3 people, his heart was filled with hesitation. He was hesitating whether or not to help the young girl in yellow get through this calamity. Although Jianchen felt somewhat guilty about what had happened in the past, he had also paid a heavy price for it. First, he was seriously injured by the 2 old men and almost lost his life. Then, he was suddenly ambushed by the young girl and shot a powerful arrow at him. Following that, she continuously shot more than 20 arrows at him. All of this had caused Jianchen's heart to be filled with anger. A cry of pain sounded out as the young girl in yellow didn't dodge in time and her arm was cut. Now, the 3 people surrounded her in a triangle formation to prevent her from escaping. Seeing this scene, Jianchen knew that the young girl in yellow couldn't hold on for much longer. After a moment of hesitation, he gritted his teeth and made a decision, and the light wind sword in his hand. How dare you obstruct our Shi family's business? You must be tired of living. The black-robed middle-aged man shouted. Little brat, it's not too late for you to back out. The one who spoke was the young man in white robes. He was attacking the young girl in yellow while shouting at Xianxia. His face was gloomy, clearly he was truly angry. Xianxia ignored him and continued to stab the middle-aged man in black with his light wind sword. The middle-aged man in black's weapon was a machete. He brandished the machete to block Xianxia's attacks, but his speed wasn't as fast as Xianxia's. After exchanging 2 blows, his attack speed couldn't keep up with Xianxia's footsteps. Just as he was about to use up all of his energy, Xianxia's light wind sword pierced through his throat like a bolt of lightning. The sharp tip of the sword pierced through the back of his throat, causing a drop of blood to drip down. The middle-aged man in black's eyes were wide open. He couldn't believe that the young man in front of him was so strong. His speed was so fast that he didn't even have time to react. Third brother. Seeing the black-robed middle-aged man die, the other man with a scar on his face, who was fighting with the yellow-clothed woman, was so angry that his eyes were about to split open. His eyes were instantly filled with blood. The face of the young man in his 30s also changed greatly. He didn't think that Xianxia, who was younger than him, would be able to deal with an Earth Saint Master so quickly. This kind of strength caused the young man to feel a chill in his heart. Friend, why do you want to incur the enmity of our Shi clan? Have you forgotten how this woman tried to deal with you? Why don't we work together? Once we deal with her, our Shi clan will definitely reward you greatly. The young man in his 30s said to Xianxia. Don't believe their nonsense. The Shi clan has always been despicable and shameless. They always go back on their words. Moreover, you have already killed a member of the Shi clan. The Shi clan will definitely not let you go. The young girl in yellow was afraid that Xianxia would turn around and help them, so she hurriedly said. Xianxia's face was indifferent. His expression didn't change in the slightest, as if he didn't hear what the two were saying. He slowly pulled out the light wind sword from the neck of the black-clothed man and then continued to rush towards the other middle-aged man who was fighting with the young girl in yellow. The light wind sword turned into a series of afterimages as it pierced towards the middle-aged man. You're courting death. Seeing this, the young man flew into a rage. His face was filled with killing intent. When had he ever invited someone with such kind words? He never thought that the other party would actually ignore him. This made him feel like he had lost face. The anger in his heart grew even stronger and finally turned into killing intent. Xianxia's light wind sword turned into a series of afterimages that enveloped the last middle-aged man. The afterimages were so dense that it was hard for the naked eye to see which one was real and which one was fake. Even if one could catch a glimpse of the real sword, it would only be for a moment. In the next moment, the sword would once again be hidden in the afterimages. The middle-aged man's face became extremely serious. He decisively closed his eyes and used his spiritual sense to determine the trajectory of the sword. Then, the sword in his hand suddenly surged with Saint Qi as it slashed out. Xianxia's light wind sword continued to stab out, one strike after another, each strike faster than the one before. The frequency of his stab was so fast that it left behind a hazy afterimage. Many times it would seem as if Xianxia had only stabbed out once, but in reality he had already stabbed out multiple times. Every strike looked like a single strike, but in reality he had already stabbed out multiple times. Facing such a fast attack, the middle-aged man simply couldn't block it. In just a few exchanges, his body was filled with multiple sword wounds. The opponent's strength is too strong. Young Master Shi, quickly activate the barrier. The middle-aged man was forced back by Xianxia. His voice was filled with some panic. A faint, bloody mark had already appeared on his neck. He had almost been slit by Xianxia. The young man was immediately alarmed when he heard the middle-aged man's cries for help. He glanced at the battle between Xianxia and the middle-aged man in a hurry, and his face immediately became rather ugly when he saw how the middle-aged man was forced back by Xianxia and could only defend. At the same time, The yellow-clothed woman who was fighting with the youth also turned her head to look at Jianshan. Her beautiful eyes were wide open and her face was filled with disbelief. Her heart was filled with shock. How is this possible? How did his strength suddenly become so strong? He was clearly not so strong just now. Furthermore, he was shot by me earlier and was clearly injured. The yellow-clothed woman's face was filled with doubt. Suddenly, a thought flashed through her mind and she thought, could it be that when he fought with me earlier, he was deliberately hiding his strength? Little brat, you've ruined our Shi family's plans. Our Shi family will definitely not let you off. Even if you run to the ends of the earth, our Shi family's experts will definitely tear you to pieces. The youth gnashed his teeth as he spoke. Every word seemed to come from the gaps between his teeth. Just as he finished speaking, a transparent barrier suddenly appeared and enveloped his entire body. The young man gave up on attacking the girl. Instead, he attacked Jianshan with the middle-aged man against the barrier. His 3-meter-long sword was like a venomous snake. The tip of the spear constantly trembled as it stabbed towards Jianshan's heart, leaving behind blurs. The light wind sword in Jianshan's hand suddenly emitted a powerful and sharp sword chi, blocking the spear. His sword followed the momentum of the spear and ruthlessly stabbed into the barrier surrounding the youth. The barrier slightly trembled but quickly returned to normal. Although the barrier looked weak, its defense was extremely strong. Jianshan was unable to break through it. The youth did not have the slightest fear as he coldly stared at Jianshan and coldly said, "Little brat, your life won't be long." After saying that, the youth used his spear like a whip and smashed it towards Jianshan. Jianshan did not say anything as he dodged the spear and turned around to attack the middle-aged man. His light wind sword turned into a silver light as it pierced towards the middle-aged man's throat. The middle-aged man had always been afraid of Jianshan's swift sword, so he had always been on guard against Jianshan. Now that he saw Jianshan coming towards him, he immediately used his great sword to block his throat and at the same time quickly retreated into the barrier. Although being forced into such a sorry state by a 20-year-old brat was a very shameful thing, but compared to his own life, face was worth nothing. Just as Jianshan's light wind sword was about to pierce through the middle-aged man's great sword, the tip of the light wind sword suddenly sank and pierced the middle-aged man's heart. The sword chi that was contained within the light wind sword immediately shot out and crushed the middle-aged man's heart. The middle-aged man's body suddenly stiffened as blood continuously flowed out from his mouth. His eyes stared at Jianshan in disbelief before his eyes widened and he slowly fell to the ground. He died with his eyes wide open. The face of the youth who was protected by the barrier was ashen. He was so angry that he was speechless. His eyes were filled with hatred as he stared at Jianshan. The hatred in his heart towards Jianshan had already reached a point of no return. Originally, their mission had been progressing very smoothly. Just when they were about to complete the mission and obtain the ruler armament, Jianshan had suddenly joined in at this crucial moment, completely turning the situation around. The mission that they were about to complete was instantly destroyed, and they had even lost 2 Earth Saint Masters. Xianxia, I want to see just how you'll take the ruler weapon from me now. The yellow-clothed girl was completely relieved. Her beautiful eyes were filled with hatred and anger as she stared at the young man in the barrier. Just a few days ago, a few of the talented uncles and elders of the Huang family who had followed her into this place had died in the hands of the Shi family in order to cover her escape. Thinking up to this point, the hatred in the yellow-clothed girl's heart grew even stronger. She slowly took out the longbow on her back and aimed at Xianxia before pulling the bowstring. She clearly knew that with her current strength, she was unable to break through the barrier. Xianxia's face was incomparably gloomy. Good. I originally didn't want to use this secret treasure, but you forced me to. As he spoke, Xianxia took out a fist-sized piece of metal from his spatial ring. The piece of metal was dark green and had ancient patterns on it. Chapter 300. I didn't expect you to be so knowledgeable. You can even recognize the seal of Treasure Mountain that hasn't been seen in decades. Xianxia laughed coldly. The yellow-clothed girl immediately put away her bow and quickly slung it on her back. She hurriedly said to Jianshan, "Damn pervert, run." Before she even finished speaking, the yellow-clothed girl had already fled into the distance. She looked slightly flustered. Jianshan looked suspiciously at the yellow-clothed girl's flustered appearance. He was very confused. Was the fist-sized piece of metal in Xianxia's hand really that scary? Even though he was full of questions, Jianshan knew that there was something he didn't know. He no longer hesitated and quickly pulled away from Xianxia. Once the seal of Treasure Mountain comes out, don't even think about escaping. Xianxia's face was gloomy. He quickly threw the piece of metal in his hand into the air. The metal seal rapidly expanded in the air at an unbelievable speed. It instantly became a 100-meter-wide metal seal. It radiated with surging energy as it flew above Jianshan's head. Jianshan's eyes suddenly widened. He stared at the ink-black base of the metal seal in shock. His face was filled with disbelief. He could swear that he had never seen or even heard of something like this before. What is this weird thing? Jianshan's mind was filled with questions. He was very curious. However, the metal seal in the air did not give Jianshan any time to think. Just as Jianshan was stunned, the metal seal fell from the sky and pressed down on Jianshan with a majestic aura. Jianshan's face suddenly changed. Only now did he know the secret of the metal seal. It was something that could be used to smash people. If he was hit by it, he definitely would not feel good. Jianshan quickly fled outside. However, the metal seal covered an area of 100 meters and fell very quickly. Just as Jianshan had made it less than 20 meters away, the metal seal was already above his head. Jianshan roared out. His hands were filled with surging saint force as he slammed them against the bottom of the metal seal in an attempt to slow it down. However, the weight of the iron seal completely exceeded Jianshan's imagination. With a loud bang, the iron seal directly disappeared from the ground with Jianshan's body. It sank into the ground and created a deep pit. In front of him, the yellow-clothed girl looked at Jianshan, who was smashed into the ground by the iron seal. Her expression changed slightly. She stamped her feet in exasperation and cursed, "Damn hooligan, why are you so stupid? Didn't I tell you to run? Why are you still standing there like a fool? You deserve to die. This is your fate for ruining the plans of my family. I'll make sure you die without a grave," Xianxia coldly said as he stared at Jianshan, who had been smashed into the ground. He understood the power of the seal of Treasure Mountain extremely well. It had been in the family for several hundred years. As the family treasure, it had been passed down from generation to generation. Its power was unimaginable. There had never been an Earth Saint Master who could survive a single strike from it. Xianxia raised his right hand and the ground in front of him immediately began to churn. Afterward, the 100-meter-wide iron seal slowly rose up from the ground before turning back into a fist-sized piece of metal and falling into his hand. After putting away the seal of Treasure Mountain, Xianxia quickly took off the space belts of the middle-aged men who had come with him. He then put away the barrier and chased after the yellow-clothed girl in the distance. Just as Xianxia passed through the bottomless pit created by the seal of Treasure Mountain, a sudden change occurred. A figure covered in mud shot out from the pit like a bolt of lightning. A sword that flickered with silver light shot towards Xianxia with a soaring sword chi. Xianxia paled in fright. However, he was still an Earth Saint Master after all. His reaction was extremely fast. Just as the sword was about to pierce his body, a transparent barrier rapidly expanded from his body. Not only did it block the sword, but as the barrier continued to expand, the sword was forced further and further away from Xianxia's body. You're actually still alive?" Xianxia involuntarily cried out as he stared at the figure covered in mud in shock. He was greatly surprised by this outcome, as if he could not accept it. Seeing that his attack had been blocked by the barrier again, the mud-covered Jianshan sighed in disappointment. He quickly landed on the ground and immediately spat out a mouthful of blood mixed with bits of his organs. Xianxia sneered and said, "You're the first Earth Saint Master to survive an attack from the seal of Treasure Mountain. You should feel honored. It looks like although you've taken an attack from the seal of Treasure Mountain, you've also been heavily injured. Then, let me use the seal of Treasure Mountain again to completely end your life. For an Earth Saint Master to be attacked by the seal of Treasure Mountain twice, you can die without regrets. Hearing this, Jianxin's expression changed. This time, he learned his lesson and immediately fled into the distance. The seal of Treasure Mountain turned back to the size of a mountain and flew towards Jianxin. The majestic pressure was so great that Jianxin almost suffocated. Only after taking an attack from the seal of Treasure Mountain did Jianxin truly understand just how powerful this strange thing was. If he was hit by the seal of Treasure Mountain again, he would probably be completely done for. Even if he managed to survive, he would only be left with half his life. Damn it, just what is this thing? How can it be so powerful? Why have I never heard of it before? Looking at the seal of Treasure Mountain that was rapidly flying towards him, Jianxin cursed in his heart. Back when he was in the library of Kargath Academy, he had never seen any information about these things. The seal of Treasure Mountain flew extremely quickly in the air. Jianxin was already heavily injured, so he could only use less than 50% of his speed. He was simply unable to outrun the seal of Treasure Mountain, so he could only watch as the seal of Treasure Mountain rapidly approached him. Whoosh 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 whoosh. Suddenly, the sound of the air being torn apart rang out in the distance. One golden arrow after another tore through the air and struck the seal of Treasure Mountain in the air. Boom! Following the violent explosion, the seal of Treasure Mountain that was as big as a mountain immediately shook in the air, and the speed at which it was chasing after Jianxin was greatly reduced. Seeing that the seal of Treasure Mountain was about to catch up with Jianxin and completely end his life, the yellow-clothed woman suddenly stepped in and used the longbow in her hand to forcibly hinder the seal of Treasure Mountain's flying speed, allowing Jianxin to escape from certain death. Standing on the side, Xianxia was so angry that his nose was crooked. "You stinking woman, wait until I catch you, I will definitely torture you to death." Xianxia's face was extremely gloomy as he stared at the yellow-clothed woman who was continuously shooting arrows in the distance. He was flustered and exasperated as he roared loudly and gnashed his teeth. "Stinking hooligan, quickly come to me." The yellow-clothed woman did not pay any attention to Xianxia and shouted at Jianxin. Hearing this, Jianxin did not hesitate at all and immediately ran towards the yellow-clothed woman. Behind him, the seal of Treasure Mountain was still relentlessly chasing after him. The yellow-clothed woman constantly pulled the bowstring and shot out golden arrows one after another. Not only did they hinder the seal of Treasure Mountain's flying speed, but they also constantly shook the seal of Treasure Mountain in the air. With the yellow-clothed woman's help, the distance between Jianxin and the seal of Treasure Mountain grew larger and larger. In the end, he finally arrived beside the yellow-clothed woman. "Let's go, the seal of Treasure Mountain is extremely powerful. Once hit, even a Heaven Saint Master would be heavily injured. Fortunately, Xianxia is not very strong and is unable to use the true power of the seal of Treasure Mountain." The yellow-clothed woman shot arrows to stop the seal of Treasure Mountain from approaching as she quickly retreated. The seal of Treasure Mountain was continuously bombarded by the yellow-clothed woman's arrows, making it difficult for the seal of Treasure Mountain to approach. The two of them took this opportunity to quickly retreat. When they had retreated to a certain distance, the yellow-clothed woman turned the longbow towards Xianxia on the ground. Although she could not injure him, the powerful force of the explosion prevented him from taking a single step forward. The seal of Treasure Mountain cannot be more than 50 meters away from Xianxia, or else it will break free from his control. The yellow-clothed woman said from the side. She was clearly very familiar with the seal of Treasure Mountain and knew quite a bit about it. The two of them quickly retreated from the area while the Xianxia behind them was unable to advance at all due to the golden arrows. In the end, he could only watch as Jianxin and the yellow-clothed woman left. His face was filled with unwillingness. For hours later, Jianxin and the yellow-clothed woman appeared several dozen kilometers away. They were hiding in a pitch-black cave. The cave was not large and there were traces of it being excavated by humans. A pile of torches slowly burned in the cave, producing crackling sounds from time to time. Jianxin lay powerlessly in a corner. His face was extremely pale. First, he had been injured by the yellow-clothed woman's arrows. Then he had gone through a bitter battle, causing his wounds that had yet to recover to become even more severe. In the end, he had been smashed into the ground by the seal of Treasure Mountain, causing him great damage. With all these injuries added together, Xianxia had almost lost his life. Fortunately, his body had been refined by energy and had become extremely tough. If a regular Earth Saint Master had been smashed by the seal of Treasure Mountain, they would have definitely died. The sound of clothes being torn rang out from the cave. The yellow-clothed woman was currently hiding behind a large rock, treating the wounds on her arm. The longbow remained on her back, never leaving her side. Cough, cough. Xianxia coughed twice and spat out 2 mouthfuls of blood. He was currently extremely heavily injured and needed to heal as soon as possible. However, with the yellow-clothed woman present, it was inconvenient for him to use Radiant Saint Force to heal quickly. Otherwise, this secret of his would definitely be exposed. Xianxia did not want to announce that he could control Radiant Saint Force because all Radiant Saint Masters on the Tianyuan continent did not have any martial prowess. They could be described as extremely weak. Not only was he an Earth Saint Master, his Radiant Saint Master level was quite high as well. If this matter was exposed, it would definitely cause him quite a lot of trouble. As a result, he could only endure silently to one side. He constantly circulated Saint Force within him and used the most basic method to heal. Chapter 301. Xianxia did not hold back. He extended his hand and grabbed the bottle. Unscrewing the cap, he placed the bottle in his mouth. Right now, it was inconvenient for him to use Radiant Saint Force to heal, so this kind of medicine was exactly what he needed. Moreover, he was immune to poisons, so he was not afraid of the yellow-clothed woman giving him poison. The bottle was not filled with pills. Instead, it was filled with a liquid. It was extremely bitter. Xianxia poured all the liquid in the bottle into his mouth before slowly swallowing it. As the liquid entered his stomach, a warm current slowly appeared in his body and quickly spread in all directions. Sensing the changes in his body, Xianxia immediately closed his eyes and focused on healing. However, he still maintained a high level of vigilance towards the outside world. Although the matter between him and the yellow-clothed woman had been settled, who could guarantee that this unruly and willful young miss of a large clan would not suddenly stab him with a sword when he was unprepared? The young woman looked at Xianxia, who had closed his eyes to heal, with a complicated gaze. Afterwards, she silently walked to the fire and sat down. She hugged her knees with both hands as her bright and intelligent eyes stared blankly at the flickering flames. Who knew what she was thinking about? A strange silence filled the cave. Only the flickering flames of the torches illuminated the pitch-black cave. The flames burned, producing crackling sounds from time to time. While Xianxia was healing, the young woman did not do anything to Xianxia. She sat in front of the fire the entire time, staring blankly at the flickering flames in a daze. For hours later, Xianxia slowly opened his eyes and sat up with some difficulty. He leaned against the cold wall behind him. After 4 hours of treatment, he had completely absorbed the medicinal effects of the healing medicine. Although he was still far from fully recovered, at least the injuries in his body had stabilized. Xianxia looked at the yellow-clothed woman who sat in front of the fire in a daze. His gaze paused on the golden bow on her back for a while. He said, "Can you tell me what kind of weapon is that bow on your back? Why is it so powerful? And the seal of Treasure Mountain in the hands of the person who tried to kill you. What kind of weapons are those? They are clearly not your saint weapons, but why are their powers so terrifying?" Xianxia was filled with questions. He desperately wanted to know the answer. Hearing this, the yellow-clothed woman slightly raised her head and glanced at Xianxia. She then lowered her head and continued to look at the flickering flames without saying anything. Xianxia did not ask any more questions. Although he really wanted to know the secrets of these things, if the yellow-clothed woman was unwilling to tell him, he would not beg her. These weapons are all ruler armaments. A while later, the yellow-clothed woman finally said something. The conditions for forming ruler armaments are extremely harsh. There aren't many of them on the Tianyuan continent. It said that these ruler armaments were all used by saint rulers. After the saint rulers passed away, these saint weapons did not disperse into the surroundings. Instead, they were perfectly preserved. The woman in yellow slowly removed the bow from her shoulder and gently stroked it with her hand. She said, "This bow is called the Sun Moon Bow. It's a ruler's weapon left behind by an ancestor of our Huang clan after he passed away. It has been passed down from generation to generation as our clan's heirloom. It's actually a saint weapon condensed from the body of a saint ruler. No wonder it's so powerful." Xianxia came to a realization. The seal of Treasure Mountain in Xianxia's hand is also a ruler armament, but it's much more powerful than my Sun Moon Bow. Coupled with the fact that he's already stronger than me, having reached the second cycle of Earth Saint Master, the power of the seal of Treasure Mountain is even greater. My Sun Moon Bow is not his opponent at all, the woman continued. Then what's with the barrier around him? Xianxia continued to ask. If it were not for the barrier, he would have killed Xianxia long ago. That barrier was left behind by a saint ruler on him. It's extremely powerful. Even my Sun Moon Bow can't break through it, Xianxia said. The yellow-clothed woman slightly frowned. She felt extremely troubled by the barrier around Xianxia. Then is there a way to break the barrier around him or make it disappear? Xianxia asked. The yellow-clothed woman said, "There is, but we can't do it. When the power of the attack exceeds the limit of what the barrier can withstand, the barrier will naturally be broken. In addition, when the barrier's power is used up, it will disappear. However, as for how long the barrier's power can last, I don't know." Reaching this point, the yellow-clothed woman gnashed her teeth and hatefully said, "If it weren't for Xianxia's barrier, I would have killed him with an arrow long ago. That hateful Shi family, they actually took advantage of the mercenary tournament to steal our Huang family's ruler armament. My poor uncles, in order to cover my escape, they were all killed by Xianxia. Once we get out, I'll definitely get Uncle Feng and Uncle Yun to avenge the deaths of our Huang family." The yellow-clothed woman's eyes were filled with hatred and fury. Hearing this, Xianxia chuckled and said, "I seem to have heard Xianxia say that the wind and cloud elders that you rely on have already been dealt with. They can't protect you at all." The girl immediately clenched her fists tightly and hatefully said, "That hateful Shi family, they've always been targeting our Huang family's Sun Moon Bow. This time, they must have planned it all out." Hearing this, Xianxia couldn't help but feel a sense of schadenfreude. He chuckled and said, "Xianxia has the barrier protecting him, so he can't be harmed at all. Moreover, he has the Treasure Mountain seal and he came prepared. It seems that this time, your Huang family's Sun Moon Bow is destined to fall into the hands of the Shi family." Who would have thought that the girl's reaction would be so great? She suddenly stood up and angrily glared at Xianxia. She angrily said, "Damn rogue, you better not say such unpleasant things. Do you believe that I won't teach you a lesson right now?" "Hee, I'm only speaking the truth." Xianxia was not afraid at all, as if he had nothing to fear. "Do." The girl angrily glared at Xianxia. She was extremely angry. Finally, she snorted and walked out of the cave. The girl's departure was exactly what Xianxia wanted. After using his hearing to confirm that the girl had gone far away, Xianxia immediately focused his mind to control the Radiant Saint Force to heal his injuries. As the Radiant Saint Force slowly gathered, the dim cave lit up in an instant. The milky white light emitted by the Radiant Saint Force was very obvious in the daytime, and in this dim cave, the white light emitted by the Radiant Saint Force was even more eye-catching. The milky white light was comparable to the scorching sun in the sky, illuminating the dim cave in a dazzling white light. It was very dazzling, but it was not blinding. Controlling the Radiant Saint Force was mainly the effect of his spirit, and Xianxia's spirit also increased at the same time as his strength. Ever since he broke through to Earth's Saint Master, his spirit had also been refined, becoming much more powerful than before. As a result, his Radiant Saint Force was much stronger than before. Not only did it make the Radiant Saint Force more dense, it even lasted longer. In just 2 hours, the Radiant Saint Force had completely healed Xianxia's injuries. Its effects were so great that they could be described as miraculous. Jianshan's complexion returned to normal, and he immediately jumped up from the ground. He took out a large jug of water from his space ring, took off his muddy clothes, and began to wash his body. Jianshan had prepared all this water beforehand. Because his space ring was large enough, he had stored over 20 large gourds of water. Every gourd had a total of 50 kilograms of water. This was to prevent himself from falling into an environment where there was a severe lack of water, in case he needed it. Splash, splash, splash. The ice-cold water flowed down Jianshan's head, washing away all the dirt and mud that remained on Jianshan's body. The water fell to the ground, creating a series of splashing sounds. In this sealed cave with only one entrance, it was extremely ear-piercing, producing a loud noise. At this moment, the yellow-clothed woman was sitting alone on a rock outside the cave with a heavy heart. Her face was filled with worry. She was extremely worried that what Jianshan had said would really happen. The Shi family had come prepared this time. Although Brother Feng Yun was powerful, there were many experts in the Shi family who could stop Brother Feng Yun and Brother Feng Yun. From Shi Xianxia's words, it was not difficult to tell that the Shi family had already sent out experts to deal with Brother Feng Yun and Brother Feng Yun outside. As a result, once she left, she would have nothing to rely on. In this trial space, Shi Xiangran was protected by a barrier. Although she possessed the king armament, the Sun Moon Bow, she was far too weak. She was unable to use the full power of the Sun Moon Bow, so she was unable to do anything to Shi Xiangran. In addition, the Treasure Mountain Seal in Shi Xiangran's hand was also a king weapon with very powerful attack power. Once Shi Xiangran used the Treasure Mountain Seal to restrain his Sun Moon Bow, he would not be able to resist Shi Xiangran's attack. Although she could use the Sun Moon Bow to restrain Shi Xiangran's movements through the barrier, she would always be in a passive position. It was not a long-term plan, and she could not draw the Sun Moon Bow endlessly. If this continued, she would run out of Saint Force sooner or later. I have to keep the Sun Moon Bow. At worst, I'll just stay in Mercenary City and wait for the clan to save me. I don't believe your Shi family will dare to touch me in Mercenary City. The woman's face was icy cold as she made up her mind. At this moment, a strange sound rang out from the cave behind her. The woman was immediately attracted by it. She glanced back at the pitch-black cave in doubt as she mumbled to herself, "Strange, why is there a sound? That hoodlum is clearly heavily injured, so how can he make such a big noise?" The young girl calmed herself down, and with a head full of doubts, she quietly walked into the winding cave. At this moment, Jianshan was still washing himself in the cave. Although the woman carefully made her way into the cave, she did not give off any killing intent or presence, so she was not dangerous at all. Jianshan's vision had also been greatly affected by the sound of the water falling to the ground, so he did not sense the woman's entry at all. Very soon, the woman carefully made her way into the cave with a face filled with curiosity. However, when she used the flickering light to see the situation inside, she immediately became stunned. What she saw was the scene of Jianshan washing himself. Jianshan was currently completely naked. "You hoodlum!" The woman reacted very quickly and let out an ear-piercing shriek. Clang! The large gourd that Jianshan held high above his head fell to the ground. Jianshan reacted very quickly and immediately took out a set of clothes from his space ring. He flashed to a dark corner where the light from the fire could not reach. He did not care about his wet body and hurriedly put on the clothes. Chapter 302. After leaving, the young girl did not enter the cave again, and Jianshan quickly put on his clothes. His face was slightly red, and he was extremely embarrassed. He did not think that the young girl would be so rude. She had actually entered without a sound, and not even the sound of her footsteps could be heard. This was definitely done on purpose. If it wasn't for the girl's big reaction, Jianshan really suspected that the girl still hated him for peeping at her body. Today, she wanted to peep back. If Jianshan's thoughts were known by the girl in yellow, she might even have thoughts of jumping into the river to commit suicide. After putting on his clothes, Jianshan walked out of the cave. The girl in yellow stood not far from the entrance of the cave. Her back was facing Jianshan, but Jianchen could still clearly see her pink neck and red cheeks. Jianchen couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed that a girl saw him bathing. But in the next moment, his face became serious. He shouted at the girl, "Hey, how can you be so rude? You actually came in quietly and peeped at me bathing." A few years ago, Jianchen unintentionally peeped at the girl's body and suffered a lot. Today, the girl actually sneaked into the cave and peeped at him bathing. It wasn't easy to get a chance to turn things around, so of course, Jianchen wouldn't miss it. The girl's face was originally embarrassed, but when she heard Jianchen say that she came in quietly and peeped at him bathing, her red face was instantly filled with anger. She no longer cared about being embarrassed and suddenly turned to glare at Jianchen. "Bah? Who peeped at you bathing? Which eyes of yours saw it?" Jianchen was speechless. At that time, his eyes were closed because of the water. He didn't see the girl's figure at all. He only heard her scream, but Jianchen wouldn't be so honest. He immediately put on a serious face and said, "Both of my eyes saw it." "Bah, you stinking hooligan, you're so shameless. I should be the one asking you. That's obviously my cave. I'm already kind enough to let you live in it. You actually didn't even inform me, the owner, before taking a bath inside. That's your fault, so how can you blame me?" The girl immediately counterattacked. In order to save her face and not let Jianchen catch her, she was going all out. This cave was clearly dug out by someone before. When did it become yours? Jianchen's face was full of confusion. This is an ownerless cave. I was the first to enter. Of course, I am the owner of this cave, the girl said confidently. Her sharp tongue was her forte when it came to bickering. Then Jianchen was not convinced and continued to bicker with the girl. Soon he was speechless and lost. He knew that if he continued to bicker with the girl, he would lose without a doubt. When it came to killing, he wouldn't even frown. There weren't many people who could be stronger than him. However, once he started bickering with someone, he would immediately lose. Moreover, the girl's mouth was full of crooked reasoning. She made 1 into 2 and 2 into 3. Moreover, she said it confidently and logically as if it was true. Jianchen, who was not good at bickering, was completely under her control. "You are good." Jianchen had a belly full of anger. He wanted to use this to humiliate the girl, but he didn't expect that after just a few words, he would be completely suppressed by the girl. There was no room for him to turn the situation around. "I saw your body and you saw mine. Moreover, I also saved your life. We're even now. From now on, we don't owe each other anything. Goodbye." After throwing down these words, Jianchen left without looking back. You pervert." After hearing Jianchen say that he had seen her body, the girl suddenly became flustered and exasperated. She couldn't help but recall the scene of their first meeting. Her beautiful face was red with anger and shame. The good mood she had after seeing Jianchen being humiliated instantly disappeared without a trace. "What do you mean you saved my life? Didn't I save you once? If it weren't for me restraining the seal of Treasure Mountain for you, you would have been smashed into meat paste." The girl was so angry that she didn't let go of any opportunity to fight back. Hearing this, Jianchen's advancing body slightly paused. The situation was just as the girl said. If it weren't for her using the sun and moon bow to restrain the seal of Treasure Mountain, he really wouldn't have been able to escape from it. However, he didn't want to explain anything and continued to walk away. At this time, the girl suddenly discovered that Jianchen's injuries had miraculously healed. He even seemed to be full of energy. The girl's face was filled with shock. She couldn't understand how Jianchen's extremely heavy injuries could be healed in just 2 hours. "Hey, stinking hooligan, how can you recover from your injuries so quickly?" the girl asked from behind. Her voice still carried a trace of anger, but her pair of lively eyes were blinking, full of curiosity. "I have an even better healing panacea." Jianchen didn't want to answer, but if he did, the girl in yellow would inevitably guess his secret. In order to dispel her doubts, he could only make up a random reason. As he spoke, Jianchen's body had already walked further and further away. He was about to disappear from the girl in yellow's sight. Looking at Jianchen's back, the girl in yellow hesitated. In the end, she gritted her teeth and chased after him. At the same time she shouted, "Stop right there, pervert, where are you going?" The girl in yellow quickly arrived behind Jianshan. Jianshan didn't even turn his head as he walked forward step by step. He said emotionlessly, "Why are you following me?" "Tui, who's following you?" The girl in yellow glared at him and said, "You killed 2 experts of the Shi family. The Shi family definitely won't let you go. Shi Xiangran has a barrier for defense and the seal of Treasure Mountain for attack. If you meet him alone, you definitely won't be his opponent. Without my help, you won't even be able to escape if you meet Shi Xiangran. You're the one who's afraid," Jianshan said indifferently. The girl's eyebrows furrowed. "What's there to be afraid of? Pervert, don't talk nonsense. Do you believe that I won't cut you into pieces right now? If you throw away the bow, you won't be my opponent at all. Even if you have the bow, you won't be able to defeat me." Jianshan seemed to have forgotten his previous unhappiness and returned to his normal self. He said emotionlessly, without any emotion in his voice. "Do." The girl was quite angry. Her chest heaved violently, but she couldn't find anything to say. Jianshan was able to kill 2 Earth Saint Masters of the Shi family in an extremely short amount of time despite being injured. Moreover, he still had the strength to fight with Shi Xiangran. This showed that he was much stronger than her. After a moment of silence, the girl slowly calmed down. After hesitating for a while, she said with a face full of unwillingness, "You've seen Shi Xiangran's strength. He has a barrier protecting him, so we can't hurt him at all. However, he can use the seal of Treasure Mountain to attack us. If we meet him alone, we'll definitely be at a disadvantage. If the situation is bad, we won't even have the chance to survive. My Sun Moon Bao can restrain Shi Xiangran's footsteps and limit the attack range of the seal of Treasure Mountain. You can deal with the helpers Shi Xiangran may bring. This is the only way we can deal with Shi Xiangran." The girl still couldn't bring herself to say it directly. She could only use very clever words to express her intentions. Her intention to work together was obvious. Jianshan thought about it for a while and then nodded in agreement. He had killed 2 experts of the Shi family, so the Shi family and Shi Xiangran definitely wouldn't let him go. Shi Xiangran had a barrier protecting him, so his defense was very strong. Even the Sun Moon Bao couldn't break through it. Jianshan couldn't guarantee that his sword chi wouldn't be able to break through the barrier. If even the sword chi couldn't do anything, then Jianshan wouldn't have any other way to kill Shi Xiangran. However, Shi Xiangran could use the barrier to control the seal of Treasure Mountain to attack him. At that time, if the girl didn't have the Sun Moon Bao to restrain the seal of Treasure Mountain, it would definitely take him a lot of effort to escape from the seal of Treasure Mountain. Even if he could escape, he would have to face Shi Xiangran's pursuit all day long. Shi Xiangran completely relied on the treasure to make Jianshan helpless. If he abandoned the treasure, then Jianshan wouldn't even put him in his eyes. Jianshan couldn't afford to be chased all over the place by someone he didn't even put in his eyes. Working together with the girl was also a perfect plan. Jianshan and the girl in yellow walked together. The 2 of them rarely spoke, and even when they did, they didn't chat. They didn't even know each other's names. Clearly, there was still a barrier between the 2 of them. Along the way, there were quite a few participants who saw how young the 2 of them were and how beautiful the girl was. They all became lustful and came up to make things difficult for the 2 of them. Not only were there great Saint Masters among them, there were also a few Earth Saint Masters. However, they had clearly underestimated the 2 of them. Most of them had their throats slit by Jianshan's sword, and the girl in yellow had angered a few people who had said extremely unpleasant things. The girl in yellow had taken the initiative to attack and killed them all. An Earth Saint Master had even been shot to death by the Sun Moon Bao on her back, dying in an extremely miserable manner. The girl in yellow didn't seem very old, but it clearly wasn't the first time she had killed people. Even though she couldn't be as calm and collected as Jianshan, her expression didn't change at all. She acted decisively and mercilessly, which made Jianshan secretly admire her. It was indeed very rare for a child of a large clan to be able to do something like this, and she was also the daughter of a large clan. Half a month passed in the blink of an eye. Jianshan and the girl in yellow didn't see Shi Xiangran. They were now far away from the mountain range filled with sword-shaped peaks and had arrived at an uneven mountain range covered in grass. During this period of time, Xianxia and the girl in yellow still maintained their previous indifference. They rarely spoke and almost never chatted. It was worth mentioning that the two of them had obtained an extremely great harvest in this half a month. They had found over 2,000 tokens from the Earth Saint Masters, but they had found less than 50 tokens from the Great Saint Masters. It was now the end of the elimination round. There was only a month and a few days left until the end of the competition. After this period of fighting, almost all of the tokens had been gathered in the hands of the Great Saint Masters. There were very few Great Saint Masters who still had tokens left. Just as Xianxia and the girl in yellow climbed up a high slope, the sound of battle rang out in Xianxin's ears. Looking over, he saw a person wrapped in a layer of wind-attributed saint force fighting against two Earth Saint Masters. Not far away, there was a person covered in blood lying on the ground. The wind-attributed saint force Earth Saint Master was extremely powerful. He was able to force the two Earth Saint Masters back by himself. Both of them were covered in wounds and their clothes were dyed red. They were completely covered in blood. However, the wind-attributed saint force Earth Saint Master was completely unharmed. Chapter 303. Xianxia. Xianxia yelled out in grief and indignation. He left behind an afterimage as he charged toward the three of them with lightning-like speed. At the same time, a tremendous killing intent radiated from his body. It was frightening as it soared into the sky. The yellow-clothed woman standing beside Xianxia had a golden bow on her back. She stared at Xianxia in surprise as he disappeared into the distance. This was the first time she had seen Xianxia lose his composure like this in the days that she had spent with Xianxia. His emotions fluctuated so greatly. Afterwards, he took small steps and walked down the hill at a steady pace. Xianxia's yell was obviously heard by the three of them. The two blood-soaked people immediately roused their spirits. They never thought that they would actually encounter someone who knew the young master of the Tianqin clan at such a crucial moment. The two of them who were already at the end of their rope immediately lit up with joy as if they had found a life-saving straw. When they looked over with joy, they became stunned. Their faces darkened and their joy from before completely vanished. The two of them knew Xianxia. He was a friend that the young master of the Tianqin clan, Xianxia, had made outside. Although his talent was quite good, reaching the strength of a great saint master at such a young age, their opponent was an Earth Saint Master, and an extremely powerful one with wind-attributed saint force. Even when the two of them worked together, they could only retreat, let alone Xianxia, who was only a great saint master. At this moment, the wind-attributed Earth Saint Master also discovered Xianxia's arrival. However, when he saw Xianxia's young and handsome face, his face suddenly changed. He could not help but think of what had happened half a month ago. A deep fear suddenly appeared in the wind-attributed Earth Saint Master's heart. He no longer had the courage to continue fighting. I'll let you go for now. The wind-attributed Earth Saint Master threw out these harsh words. His face was filled with unwillingness as he quickly fled into the distance. After the middle-aged man left, one of the blood-soaked people finally fainted because he was heavily injured and had overused his saint force. The other person was not much better off. He sat on the ground with a withered expression. Xianxia, how are you? Wake up. An urgent call rang out from the side. Xianxia had already arrived in front of Xianxia. He held Xianxia's head as he urgently called out. His voice was filled with indescribable anxiety. Xianxia's injuries were extremely heavy. Not only was he covered in blood, but the surrounding grass was also covered in blood as well. 2 wounds on his body. His waist, which was as thick as a bucket, had been cut in half. Only half of his waist, leaving only half of his lower body. The other wound was on his chest. Organs. Not a single part of his body. Was half of his waist. Where was half of his waist? Waist was Xianxia. Quick, use your bow to shoot him down. Don't let him escape. Xianxia's face was filled with killing intent. He pointed at the azure figure that had already escaped 2 kilometers away and was about to disappear into the mountains as he yelled at the yellow-clothed woman. The yellow-clothed woman who was walking over unhurriedly originally wanted to use the sun-moon bow to kill the person who had escaped. However, when she heard Jianxin's commanding tone, she immediately frowned and stopped. She withdrew her bow and coldly said, "I'm not going to shoot. Why should I listen to you?" Bang! Jianxin heavily smashed his fist into the ground, creating a half-meter deep crater in the soft ground. His bloodshot eyes stared at the girl in yellow with an extremely sharp gaze. His intense killing intent was not concealed at all. This time, Jianxin was truly enraged. Being stared at by Jianxin like a bloodthirsty beast, the yellow-clothed woman's heart violently trembled. She immediately stopped in her tracks and felt an inexplicable sense of sorrow. At this moment, she suddenly regretted not killing the person who had escaped. When she changed her mind, the wind-attributed Earth Saint Master had already crossed the mountain and disappeared. Jianxin. Just when Jianxin was about to use his Radiant Saint Force to heal Xianxia, an almost inaudible voice suddenly entered Jianxin's ears. Xianxia's tightly shut eyes opened a tiny slit. His lips trembled slightly as he mumbled something. "Xianxia, hang in there. I'll help you recover very soon." With that, Jianxin was about to use his Radiant Saint Force to heal Xianxia. Xianxia was currently in an extremely dangerous situation. His life was hanging by a thread and he could die at any time. Jianxin. Xianxia could only open his eyes a tiny slit. He raised his right hand with great difficulty and grabbed Jianxin's hand. He slowly placed it on his waist and stammered, "Space, small friend about it." Xianxia's voice was weak. He could not even make a sound towards the end. All he could do was sigh. With that, his head tilted to the side and he fainted. Jianxin still heard Xianxia's words clearly. He immediately and carefully removed Xianxia's space belt, afraid that he would touch his wounds. Afterwards, he rummaged through it in a hurry. In the end, he found 3 small green jade bottles on a wooden shelf. Jianxin took out the 3 jade bottles before opening all 3 of them. He checked the contents of the bottles. Every single bottle contained a thumb-sized pill that shone with a weak white light. Jianxin was shocked. He could clearly sense that although the 3 pills were just powder on the surface, they were filled with pure Radiant Saint Force. Jianxin was a Radiant Saint Master himself, so he understood the effects of Radiant Saint Force extremely well. He immediately poured a pill out of the bottle and fed it to Xianxia. With the ingestion of the pill, Xianxia's complexion rapidly improved. Although the tiny amount of Radiant Saint Force in the pill was not enough to heal his wounds, it was enough to keep his life. However, he did not wake up. After Xianxia's wounds stabilized, Jianxin let out a huge sigh of relief. Only now did he look at the 2 bloodied men. Jianxin had seen the 2 of them before. One of them was the Zither Master. According to Xianxia, the Zither Master was an infant that his grandfather had brought back. She had grown up in the Tianqin clan and was loyal to the clan. She was still unconscious right now. The other person was not a member of the Tianqin clan. Instead, he was one of the 3 people who had come to Mercenary City with Tianzhou through the Space Gate. He was Tianzhou's brother who had gone through thick and thin with him. Currently, he was also pale-faced as he sat on the ground powerlessly. He ate medicine to heal his wounds silently. 3 silhouettes appeared on a high slope in the distance and rapidly approached this place. The arrival of the 3 people immediately raised everyone's guard. "Brother!" Suddenly, a voice mixed with joy came from the side. The person who was sitting at the side and eating healing medicine looked at the 3 people who were walking over with excitement. Then he struggled to get up from the ground. The 3 people were actually Tianzhou and the other 2 people who had been brought over by Tianzhou from the Tianqin clan. "Brother! Brother! Brother!" Tianzhou and the other 2 quickly recognized the person who was covered in blood. They cried out in alarm and quickly ran over. "Fourth brother, what happened to you? Who hurt you like this? Fourth brother, hurry up and tell me, which bastard beat you up like this?" The other two were infuriated when they saw how their brother was covered in blood. Tianzhou's complexion was very ugly as well. The three of them glanced around the area. Obviously, they discovered the unconscious Tianzhu and the young master of the Qin family. They also noticed Jianshan and the yellow-clothed woman behind him. "Who are you?" One of them glared at the yellow-clothed woman and angrily called out. Jianshan had come with them, so they all recognized Jianshan. They only did not recognize the yellow-clothed woman. The yellow-clothed woman glanced at them in disdain before turning her head to the side in a haughty manner. She could not even be bothered to look at them, let alone say anything. Her disdain was evident. The yellow-clothed woman's attitude made the man's face turn cold. He yelled out again, "Girl, I'm asking you a question. Are you deaf? Can't you hear me?" The yellow-clothed woman's face sank when she heard that. Killing intent filled her eyes as she stared at the man. She growled, "If you say another word, I'll kill you immediately." If it were not for the fact that Jianshan was standing to the side and she guessed that Jianshan probably knew them, the yellow-clothed woman would have attacked them long ago. After all, the three of them were Earth Saint Masters and possessed quite a few battle medallions. The man was infuriated. His saint force surged as a curved blade appeared in his hand. He roared, "You must be tired of living. Let me teach you a lesson right now." He was about to charge forward when he finished speaking. "Sai, second brother, you really don't know how to be romantic. How can you even lay your hands on such a pretty girl?" An ugly person standing beside Zhou Tian extended his hand to stop his second brother who had already drawn his saint weapon. He glanced at the yellow-clothed woman with a perverted gaze. The second brother was slightly surprised when he heard that, but he soon returned to his senses. He snickered, "Third brother, you're still the quick-witted one. It's just too much of a pity to kill such a pretty girl." He then snickered at the yellow-clothed woman, "Little beauty, I've changed my mind now. It's just too much of a pity to kill such a pretty girl like you. Why don't you accompany us for a bit first? If we're satisfied with your service, we'll naturally let you go." The yellow-clothed woman's face was frosty and extremely gloomy. Jianshan's face sank slightly when he heard that. Although he had a great opinion of the yellow-clothed woman because of what had happened earlier, he really could not stand the actions of these two people. Moreover, he was in the same boat as the yellow-clothed woman no matter what. Jianshan clearly did not have a good impression of Zhou Tian and the others. Zhou Tian had made things difficult for Jianshan quite a bit in the Tianqin clan before. "If you don't want to die, the two of you better watch your mouths." Jianshan slowly stood up and glared at them coldly as he growled. "Fuck, kid, we're talking to the little beauty. What right do you have to interfere? Do you want to die?" The second brother glared at Jianshan and roared. His face was filled with killing intent. Although Jianshan was on good terms with the first young master of the Tianqin clan, Qin Shao, and Tianzhou was also a part of the Tianqin clan, as Tianzhou's brothers, they knew that Tianzhou hated Jianshan very much. Tianzhou's face sank as well. His gaze towards Jianshan was filled with intense killing intent. Back in the Tianqin clan, Tianzhou had a great opinion of Jianshan and had argued with him. If the patriarch of the Tianqin clan had not arrived in time to stop the two of them, he would have attacked Jianshan long ago. On the way to Mercenary City, Tianzhou had wanted to attack Jianshan more than once, but he had held himself back because of the Great Elder. Now that such a great opportunity had presented itself before him, he obviously would not miss it. Tianzhou glanced at the bloodied fourth brother. The fourth brother quickly understood what Zhou Tian was trying to say. He immediately pointed at Jianshan and yelled, "Big brother, second brother, third brother, we were injured by this brat. This brat is cruel and unscrupulous. He wanted to kill Qin Shao from the Tianqin clan. Me and another brother from the Tianqin clan were caught off guard and were heavily injured by his sneak attack. If you hadn't arrived in time, I probably wouldn't have been able to see you again." Little Four said with tears and snot. He was in an extremely miserable state. Tianzhou's face was extremely sunken. He stared at Jianshan coldly and said, "Brat, to think that my big brother was so polite to you, treating you as an honored guest. Yet you actually did such a heartless thing. Today I, Tianzhou, will not forgive you." third brother, go capture the murderer who wanted to kill my nephew Xianxia. In Tianzhou's eyes, Jianshan was only a great saint master. He did not take him seriously at all, so he would not lower himself to personally take action. Yes, big brother. The third brother immediately responded. He walked towards Jianshan with a sneer. He did not even take out his own saint weapon. He did not take this brat who was only a great saint master seriously at all. A cold light flickered through Jianshan's eyes. He did not try to explain himself because it was completely unnecessary. Stop! Suddenly, a rather weak voice rang out. The bloody Qinju had awoken at some point in time. He crawled up from the ground with difficulty and weakly said, "You've misunderstood. We were injured by an extremely powerful Earth Saint Master. It has nothing to do with this young man." Tianzhou's expression changed slightly. He glanced at the Qinju and yelled, "Nonsense! Qinju, you must be muddle-headed. You, fourth brother, and nephew Xianxia were clearly injured by this brat. There was no one else." Hearing this, the Qinju's eyes flickered, but he did not make a sound. He had just woken up and did not hear what Tianzhou had said, so he was not clear about the situation. But now, he could tell that Zhou Tian was sincerely trying to make things difficult for Jianshan. He was currently heavily injured and could not even take care of himself. Even if he wanted to stop this, he did not have the strength to do so. At this time, the third brother had already arrived in front of Jianshan. He stared at Jianshan's handsome face with a cold smile. He directly reached out his hand to grab Jianshan's shoulder. The strength of his hand was so great that if a normal great saint master was caught by this hand, their bones would have been crushed. Jianshan's eyes flashed with a cold light. The light wind sword appeared in his right hand. Before the third brother could react, the light wind sword's sharp edge was already on his neck. This sudden turn of events caused the third brother to turn pale with fright. His hand that was about to grab Jianshan's shoulder also froze in midair. He could neither advance nor retreat. Why you? The third brother was tongue-tied as he stared at the sword that was already on his neck. He was so shocked that he could not say anything. A great saint master had actually placed a weapon on his neck without him noticing. This caused the third brother, who was only an earth saint master, to be extremely shocked. He found it hard to accept this fact. If you continue to distort the truth, then don't blame me for being impolite. Jianshan coldly said as he looked at Zhou Tian and the others. Being threatened by a junior caused Tianzhou to feel extremely embarrassed. He yelled out, "Go, kill him and save the third brother." As he said that, a large, fiery red sword appeared in Tianzhou's hand. He raised it and charged at Jianshan. The second brother also took out his own saint weapon and charged at Jianshan with Tianzhou. At the same time, the third brother's eyes flashed with a strong killing intent. Taking advantage of the fact that Jianshan's attention was on the other two, he clawed at Jianshan's throat with lightning speed. Jianshan coldly snorted as a disdainful sneer appeared on his face. Following that, the light wind sword on the third brother's neck suddenly sliced off. The third brother's head was immediately separated from his neck, causing blood to spurt out like a fountain. Very quickly, the ground was dyed red with blood. Third brother! Third brother! Third brother! The eyes of the four people on Tianzhou were about to pop out of their sockets as they cried out in grief. "You bastard, if I don't kill you today, I'm not a man. Avenge the third brother." Tianzhou and the others' faces were filled with killing intent. Their eyes burned with rage as if they wanted nothing more than to cut Jianshan into pieces. Search. Suddenly, the sound of something tearing through the air rang out. A golden streak of light shot out from behind Jianshan, piercing through the second brother's chest with lightning speed. A fist-sized hole appeared where his heart should have been. His heart had already vanished. The golden light didn't slow down in the slightest after piercing through the second brother's chest. Instead, it continued to shoot backward until it finally disappeared into a mountain several hundred meters away, leaving behind a bottomless hole. Jianshan turned around to see the yellow-clothed girl behind him with a frosty expression. At this moment, she was holding the golden sun moon bow, still in the posture of shooting an arrow. The second brother had previously insulted her. With the yellow-clothed girl's personality, she naturally wouldn't let him off. If it wasn't for the fact that the third brother's head had already been cut off by Jianchen, the yellow-clothed girl would have already shot the third brother to death. The second brother's eyes were wide open as he stared at the yellow-clothed girl with disbelief. He didn't think that a weak girl who wasn't even 20 years old would have such terrifying battle strength. The speed of the golden arrow was so fast that he didn't even have time to react. Boom! The second brother's body collapsed. He had been killed by a weak girl who wasn't even 20 years old. He died with a grievance. Seeing the fate of the second brother, Tianzhou's expression changed drastically. He immediately paled. Whether it was Jianchen's strength or the yellow-clothed girl's, they had both exceeded his expectations. The two Earth Saint Masters who were similar in strength to him had actually been slain in a single clash. In particular, the golden arrow that the yellow-clothed girl had shot out filled Tianzhou with dread. If that arrow had been shot at him, it would have been impossible for him to dodge at such a close distance. He would have ended up the same as the second brother. Tianzhou's charge toward Jianchen immediately came to a halt. The current situation had completely exceeded his expectations, leaving him in a dilemma. Jianchen coldly stared at the pale-faced Tianzhou and mocked, "Didn't you say you wanted to kill me? Why aren't you doing it now?" Hearing this, Tianzhou's expression immediately became ugly. His eyes were filled with hatred as he stared at Jianchen and the yellow-clothed girl. Gritting his teeth, he said, "Brat Tianzhou will not forget what happened today." With that, Tianzhou's body moved and he immediately fled into the distance. The yellow-clothed girl immediately drew her bow and was about to shoot down Tianzhou when at this moment, Jianchen left behind an afterimage as he chased after Tianzhou at a speed even faster than him. As he chased after Tianzhou, Jianchen's light wind sword danced as streaks of sharp sword qi shot toward Tianzhou. Sensing that something was wrong behind him, Tianzhou immediately began to dodge. At the same time, the huge sword in his hand was filled with fire-attributed saint force as it shattered the sword qi that he could not dodge. Because of this delay, Tianzhou's speed slowed down and Jianchen caught up to him very quickly. Jianchen's light wind sword immediately stabbed out mercilessly. With his escape blocked, Tianzhou had no choice but to fight with Jianchen. As the fire-attributed saint force in his body erupted, the surrounding air rapidly rose and the grass on the ground quickly withered. Ha! With a roar, Tianzhou's huge sword was covered in raging flames as it heavily slashed toward Jianchen. Jianchen was not afraid at all as the light wind sword that was only 2 fingers thick collided with the huge sword. Afterwards, Jianchen's arm shook and the light wind sword fiercely slapped against the huge sword. The huge sword rippled to the side as the light wind sword mercilessly pierced through Tianzhou's chest. Blood dripped from the tip of the sword as it pierced through his back. You actually have the strength of an Earth Saint Master. How is this possible?" Only now did Tianzhou come to a realization. The Jianchen that he had never placed in his eyes was actually not a great Saint Master, but an Earth Saint Master. No wonder you were able to kill third brother so easily. No wonder you were able to catch up to my speed. Tianzhou's face was ashen as he felt a deep sense of regret. If he had known earlier that Jianchen was already an Earth Saint Master, he would never have provoked him. Welcome to Legends of Cultivation, audiobooks, where we bring ancient fantasy to life through storytelling. Follow the rise of heroes who defy fate, unlock mystical powers, and battle across celestial realms. Our audiobooks are crafted for fans of Chinese cultivation novels, filled with battles, breakthroughs, and legendary artifacts. Subscribe and be part of an unforgettable journey into the realm of immortality.